Well, good morning from Ithaca, New York, home of Cornell University. My name is Nicholas Phillips, and I will be serving as your host and moderator today. Today is sure to be an interesting and really eye-opening conversation about the history of blacks and minorities in the hotel and hospitality industry. Joining us in studio, Victor Younger, the director of D&I at the Nolan School, and Calvin Stovall, the CEO of Iconic Presentations, who also happens to be releasing a book soon on the history of black hotel ownership. Victor, Calvin, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Excited to be here, Nick.
I know, it's so great to have you. It's like long time in the making.
Thank you so much for the invite. This is wonderful.
It is. It really is. So I really want to kind of start off a little background. So Calvin, Victor, again, thank you so much for being here. So before we delve into our conversation, I want to start with, who comes to mind when you think of, black people in hospitality? So for me, for example, I not necessarily think of who, but I think of, all the hotels in Tulsa that were burned down or something. So, who comes to mind for the both of you? Maybe Madam C.J. Walker, who?
Yeah. So, actually a few years ago, I had a guest speaker come to the Nolan School, Calvin Ramsey, and he was doing this research on Victor Hugo, Victor Hugo Green, who is the founder of the Green Book.
Yes.
And so the Green Book was the template for any African Americans that were traveling across the country. This is where you knew where to stop. There were safe places to go, right? Hotels and Airbnbs and places like that. So he definitely comes to mind. And then there's one other person very quickly is Philip Payton. Philip Payton is an icon in the real estate space. So in the Renaissance period, he was the individual that helped black people to get ownership within Harlem. Okay. And so having him as a resource to provide that context was just wonderful. So those are two individuals that come to mind for me.
Okay. Calvin?
Wow. That's great. Wow. Having written this book,
yeah, true.
there are a lot of people in my head, right? But particularly I may see, J.B. Stratford, Ottawa Gurley, Sarah Spencer Washington, Joseph Lee, Annie Box, and you're probably like, I don't know any of those people. See, that's the great thing about this book, because all of these people are black pioneers in the hospitality industry. So when you ask me that question, it's a loaded question. I could go on with a bunch of names, but particularly writing this book, it was a learning experience for me. So when you ask me that, all of them kind of go and swirling in my head, man.
I could imagine the Rolodex. I can see it turning. And, what is it about, maybe one or two that stand out for you? Calvin, for you first, and then Victor, I know you, mentioned real estate and during the Harlem Renaissance. But what is it about, maybe one or two people that stand out for you?
Wow. I think probably since
you,
it is to pick two people. But I would say Joseph Lee probably is one of the ones that stand out for me because of his not only his skill set being a culinary skills, but also his hotel skills, but also his resilience, particularly. Joseph Lee, he had the hotel, the Woodland, but he also owned the Abbott's Hotel as well. But what I also loved about Mr. Lee, he's also an inventor, and he actually invented a bread kneading machine because he had his own catering company, and he was able to make this machine. He had a patent for it, and of course he said that he can make so much bread in a day that might take 10 to 12 people to do. So he had this machine, but it was so efficient. What ended up happening is he had leftover bread, right? And he used that day-old bread and created another machine called a breadcrumb making machine, and that became coating for fish and chicken. So he was a pioneer in this industry. That those patents in those machines. He ended up, of course, he sold the patent, but they gave him stock. He sold it to the American Bread Company. And at the turn of the century, those machines were in hotels and people's catering companies across the nation. So it made him a very wealthy man. Yeah. But Joseph Lee, he was, I would say he was resilient because he did have a situation, I think it was about 1893, where there was a panic of depression. He lost everything.
Oh, wow.
He lost everything. but so the bread machine and stuff came later. But he had lost both hotels. Yeah.
Wow.
And then, but he came right back the next year and opened a 250-seat Pavilion restaurant, which got him back.
Oh, wow.
And back, he was relentless.
Yeah.
So he comes to mind, and of course J.B. Stratford. Since you mentioned the Tulsa massacre, he was one of the hotels that burned down, the Stratford Hotel. Wow. He had a luxury hotel as well. So yeah. So of course, see, go ahead. Let me go ahead,
Yeah,
because I'll go up, man.
You know, I love hearing stories. You know,
Yeah.
once you know the full story or something, just gives you a whole different perspective. So I know I can see you're having fun when you're
Yeah,
this book that you've been writing. You're really having fun with that. Yeah. I mean, and it's much needed, and that's the glory of it and the beauty of it. You know, so I'll just harken back to the two individuals that I mentioned, because I think, and that was Victor Hugo, and also Philip Hayden. And just to unpack Victor a little bit, just to know he was a mailman, right? Wow. And so he had access to where, obviously delivering mail, he knew where black people live, right? Oh, wow. And so when he came up with this idea, and particularly when he and his family were looking to travel, oftentimes, you know, back in that particular time, you know, that if you were to go in certain cities that were considered sundown cities, you couldn't be there. You couldn't be out at night, right? You couldn't be there. So having that knowledge, and he recognized that, wait a minute, if I'm being a mail carrier, and if I would also partner with my other mail carriers from around the country, they could help me at least pull together all of these different spaces that, you know, people of color that could travel from the South to the North, to where if they had this book that they could have at their disposal, they could know what their journey could look like and plan it well in advance. And so that really changed the travel for black people, right? And you speak about the whole aspect of just knowing hotels and you know, Airbnbs, and that's what they were for us at that point in time, right? And so that is really, it started a lot for us in terms of black people in general, people of color, having the ability to travel to some degree in a free way of knowing you could go and not have to be concerned about your family and where you're, you know, ultimately ending in terms of your road trip. And then the other one is Philip Hayden, and I cite him because, even more specifically, because back in 2018, one of our grad students, who was a graduate of a historically black college and university, was attending our Cornell School of Real Estate. And he was just, you know, thinking about, wow, I'm here, but I don't see many people look like me. So how do I create a space to and an organization where we can coalesce around like-minded people that, you know, have different perspectives? And so he looked up this wonderful person who, in real estate, was Philip Hayden. And Philip Hayden was a young entrepreneur. Okay. He's a young entrepreneur. And so when he decided that he was going to move into Harlem, which at the time, Manhattan was the place, but he wanted to make sure that there were spaces where African Americans and people of color could rent, open their own stores, have their small businesses. And so he would start to buy those up, or at least negotiate on behalf of people of color. And he did that, and it really helped build what Harlem is today in terms of the presence of people of color in Harlem, New York. And Philip Hayden, so we end up calling this organization that's founded at the Baker School, the Philip Hayden Society for Minorities in Real Estate. And so it exists today, and we're doing case competitions for historically black colleges and universities around the country, again, inviting them to expand and think about the real estate industry in terms of the commercial real estate and generational wealth.
Wow. That's amazing. I feel like we could have a whole nother conversation just on the Harlem.
And just to piggyback off of that, one of the hotels that's in the book, the Teresa in Harlem, is highlighted. And although it was not black owned, it was actually built in 1912-13. Wow. But they didn't even hire African Americans, or could they stay there until 1940. And that's because Harlem, as he mentioned, Harlem was predominantly white in the beginning. Not until around the 1940s or so did it flip over. And so the ownership of the Teresa, like, well, maybe we should start hiring some black people and get a black gym. So they pulled it, you know, they hired a black gym, they hired some black people, and that's when it became, that hotel became what they called the Waldorf of Harlem.
Oh, wow.
Everybody African American that was famous or anyone that stayed there. Joe Louis, all of them. Actually, Malcolm X had an office in there. Fidel Castro rented out 2 floors in there. John F. Kennedy did an address in front of that hotel. So that hotel actually is still standing today. It's not a hotel; it's an office building, but it is still there.
Wow, that is iconic,
That
man.
is
Wow,
That's
that's
amazing.
awesome.
It really, really is amazing to think. So I want to shift gears just a little bit. So Calvin, this is your first time here. So give us a little bit of background. What kind of got you interested in the hospitality industry as a whole?
Oh, wow. I'm going to try to make
This
this
is a
story
loaded
short.
question.
It is. Well, I'm originally from Chicago, and I kind of fell into the industry, probably like a lot of people do. Actually, my original dream, I wanted to be an architect. And, yeah, so actually out of high school, I went to a vocational high school and ended up working for an engineering company as a draftsman for a while. But like around 85, 86 or something like that, the hotel industry was becoming very hot, and a friend of mine was like, man, your personality seemed like you would. So that's what happened.
That people person, right.
You'll be good in hotel. So I actually ended up working at a Holiday Inn in downtown Chicago as a front desk clerk. I was fortunate to have an African-American woman who was running the hotel. Her name was Karen Sock. And she kind of mentored me up through the industry. So we're still friends today, actually. And so I just went on, stayed in it, and became a front desk manager at a couple of hotels in downtown Chicago, and ended up, I went to undergrad at Chicago State on the south side of Chicago, and then got accepted into Cornell's hotel school, the MPS program. So, man, I've just been loving it. I love it, man. I ended up working as I became a vice president of brand marketing for Homewood Suites by Hilton, and just been in the industry for a while. I've worked in nonprofits as well, but I'm a hotelier through and through, man. That's my life, brother. It's neat. Yes.
Was there a class or anything that maybe sparked your interest in looking into, potentially the history of Black ownership in hospitality?
Man, it's amazing how things come full circle. When I was a graduate student here, I met Evan Frazier because I was involved with the NSMH, the National Society of Minority Hoteliers at the time, and Evan was one of the founders as well. And I got involved with that organization. He was an undergraduate, and they were having their second conference, and he asked me, he's like, Calvin, we would love to have you, because I was their PR person for the organization. He was like, but could you look into Black hotel ownership from a historical perspective? He said, let's call it hospitality historiography. So I was like, yeah, I would love to do that. And so actually, I was doing research. I was looking at stuff, man, on microfiche. And some people, probably young folks listening right now, probably like, what the heck is that, man? So I was pulling all this stuff up, and I put it together, a great presentation for the conference, and it became my monograph. I got so intrigued by it, and so inspired by what I was finding out. It became my monograph, and that's pretty much how it came. Fast forward to a few years ago. I was cleaning out some stuff. They give you a nice bound copy, nice gold lettering. I was like, oh my God. And so when I pulled it out, a friend of mine happened to be at my home, and she was like, what is that? I was like, well, it's a monograph. She said, what is it about? I was like, well, it's about Black hotel ownership. Starts out about the 1700s, goes through. She was like, what? I didn't even know we owned hotels.
Yeah.
She grabs it, looks at it, like, oh my God. She's like, is this a book? Wow. There it is.
Wow.
That's the story.
That's the story.
That's as simple as it goes.
Wow.
Can't make it any plainer than that. And so I called right soon as that happened. I called Evan. I was like, Evan, because we stayed in touch, And I was like, Evan, what do you think about if I turn? He's like, brother, that right there would be absolutely phenomenal. I found me a publisher, and so there it is. That's the story.
Wow. So you penned this. What year was that you put that?
That was in 1993.
1993.
So this is a 30-year.
Man, wow. Yeah.
But you know what? God's timing is everything.
Yeah.
So it is like it. Even though it took that long, right now it feels like it's the right time because I think there's a heightened interest in this, and I'm able to get access, but access to a lot of information. But what's funny is a lot of the stuff that I found then you can't find now. It's weird. Like if I'll look up some stuff, and there's some people have digitized a lot of information, but sometimes I search things. Luckily, I have the bibliography from when I wrote the monograph.
Yeah.
So I can look up stuff, but some stuff is just difficult to find. I'm sure it's out there somewhere.
Sure, sure.
But I was fortunate to be involved in it pretty early where I had all that information.
Yeah, it's so crazy to try to look back and try to find some of those old records. It's insane. I can only imagine the work behind it. And Victor, I want to kind of loop you back in a little bit. So we were talking a little bit about education and Calvin and your background. So Victor, did you always know that you wanted to kind of study hospitality, but more or less on the operation side?
No, I'm going to coin the phrase of what Calvin said. It just kind of happened. I didn't know that. I mean, I think growing up, I always had a connection and an idea and a joy of just making people feel comfortable and really just embracing people for whoever they were. And so from there, growing up in the South, and I had, being a first generation student, I had no context for what my college experience or what to even think about in that regard. But my high school advisor said, "Hey, look, man, you got the right aptitude. Number one, you need to go to a historically black college and university, and number two is that you have this idea around business and management and hospitality." And I'm like, okay. And when you think about hospitality, in the context of, okay, what does that mean? You're a dishwasher? What does that mean that you're a housekeeper? I mean, for us as black people, I had no vision, nothing to tell me that was going to be a career path, right? That you could become a general manager, you could become, a chef, or you could become the manager of the hotel or the front desk operation, or anything within that managerial leadership perspective, right? But my point is that it was part of that attending Virginia State University, getting my undergraduate degree in hospitality management, going to work for a small company where I managed restaurants for them, and then matriculating into work for Marriott Corporation in the Washington, Baltimore, Maryland area, and just really understanding that hospitality was just in my blood. And how do you create spaces where people can enjoy, come together, have good food, have good connections, have something comfortable to be in, but also just really, bringing people together, right? And so that was the impetus behind it. And so I've always had that a part of my journey, hospitality, majoring in it, and working with Marriott Corporation, and then matriculating and work for Aramark Corporation and doing management in a different way in higher education. That's what got me into Cornell. I was managing an account in Washington, D.C. And so it was through that connection where then I matriculated to Cornell. And so I'm in a great space to where my hospitality or my background has always been a fundamental foundation of how I operate as an individual, how I operate as in my life. And so it's just very organic for me to think about hospitality, management, and people as a living ethos of how do you just create a space for people to just
feel good.
To feel good.
That's right. I love it.
And I want to follow up on that real quick. And, Calvin, you had mentioned doing a little bit of research for Evan Fraser. So in your undergraduate studies, Victor, was there a course or anything that, what was the education like, I guess? Was there a class where it was like, here's the history of minority ownership in hotels? Or what was the education like?
Certainly, I particularly if you're speaking around minorities in hospitality or in the management space, it wasn't that. It wasn't that. It was really about understanding the fundamentals of managing and what that would be about. I took business law, accounting, finance, stuff that I didn't do well in, but they were great tools that laid the foundation for understanding the intricacies of being able to be a manager and to have the skills to be a great leader within those spaces, which was so valuable for me. And so it wasn't anything that sparked that outside of just knowing that these are great tools that I could use then and have always and continue to use. There's a part of how I think about my education and how I put it to work every single day.
Yeah.
And similar, Calvin, when you were doing your MPS, was there like a course or anything like that as far as, kind of the history of minority ownership?
Oh, no. Oh, no. No, it's pretty much general, just like Victor described. It was nothing like to that level of niche. You know what I mean? That was even today when my publisher saw the manuscript, they did research on it. They were like, "You're breaking new ground. There's no book like this out there." So it is new. So there was nothing like, of course, the education I received at Cornell definitely prepared me for a corporate, role, but it was nothing to this magnitude at all. Yeah.
And with that, what was, I guess, your first reaction when your friend was like, "Yo, you need to turn this into a book"?
You know how something happens and you can feel it in your spirit, like when she said it, it was like, yeah, it should be. It actually should be. But I knew that I wanted it to be different. I didn't want it to be just a textbook. I wanted to help readers go through this journey, through these different eras, because it starts so early with Miss Pringle in the 1770s, all the way through, Jim Crow era, civil rights. So I didn't want it to just be this encyclopedia-like thing.
Yeah.
I wanted it to take you on a journey.
Yeah, you want to tell a
I
story.
want to tell a story.
Absolutely.
And so I was like, so adding the photos and all of that, I'm sure it is going to pull people in. It'll be an oversized book, and so, you just have a vision. It was like when she said it, it was just like, bing, and so, I'm just so excited about it, just to get it out there.
And what was that kind of process like for you to take, this 100-page manuscript and say, all right, I want to have this coffee table style book with graphics and, like you said, a story, not just an encyclopedia?
Right. Well, the thing was, when you think of the original monograph was less than 100 pages. It was probably like 90 or so pages. When I called the publisher, she was like, "Well, Calvin, this is a great foundation. Do you think you can find more stories so we can create a bigger piece?" And I was like, wow, because I know how much work went into just getting those. But fortunately, now with things so much online, I was able to add to what I had. Like most of the stuff in the monograph itself, it's difficult to find. But there was a lot more information out there, so I was able to create this manuscript was about 80,000 words. But here's the difficult chunk, because right now it is with the developmental editor, and he did tell me, he's like, "Calvin, I'm gonna have to get you ready for when you get this back from me.
Okay.
There's gonna be some red."
Okay.
You're gonna have to, I know there was gonna be some stuff I'm gonna have to give up to get, because I can't put all of it. I know I can't put all of it in it'll be like 7-8 volumes of stuff. And then this, and so it's just, that's going to probably be the hardest part for me, because I'm so close to these stories that are in there, having to edit it down, and then, but that's what they do. So I'm ready for when he sends it back to me.
But Calvin, you may be speaking something into fruition. Just think about all this information. Doesn't mean it stops there.
That's true.
It
That's a
doesn't
good
mean
point.
it stops there. I mean, so yeah, go through that process as you're going to go through, and let him tailor it down. He or she tailor it down. But then it could set up the next stage.
Yeah,
that seed was planted 30 years ago.
That's 30 years worth of stuff.
That's 30 years of stuff. The expectation is that will not be put in one volume.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm going to push that out into the hemisphere
Wait, hey,
and
bud,
say
I'm
there's
trying
more
to
to
catch
come.
that.
There's
Yeah,
more to
Exactly.
come.
When there's a part 2, let us know.
Oh
Yeah,
man,
exactly.
don't even say that. Don't say that. But you just never know what God has in store for you, do you? You just don't know. So yeah.
And was there a frame of reference? Because like you said, these stories go back to the 1700s, and it doesn't seem like anybody's ever written something this extensively about this topic. So what was your frame of reference?
I really didn't have one. I do know a lady named Candace C. Taylor. She's an author. She wrote a book called Overground Railroad several years ago. And she kind of, what she did was she drove to all of these sites of where a lot of these former hotels stood.
Oh, wow.
But her book has a different slant. She doesn't get into ownership and none of. She's just really highlighting the fact that we were very prominent and it had a space in the hospitality industry. So she drove to all these sites, and I think she has something at the Smithsonian. So she's made an impact. That was all I really had. And then, you know, I have some coffee table books, you know, one called Black Beauty, one a coffee table book that was created from Sammy Davis Jr.'s photographer. He was a photographer as well. People may not know that. So they made an entire coffee table book with just all his photos of all his stars, and it is a beautiful piece of art. And so I have those too. And so when I went to the publisher, I had those. Those were my examples. I was like, I want my book to model these too. Because I do consider it, what was the word I used earlier? My magnum opus. Yes, I learned a new word today. It's my magnum opus, right?
Great work, as you termed it.
Great work. So you know that I wanted to pull people in. So if you ever, I think I can't remember. It's called Black Beauty: A Celebration of Black Life or something like that. That book and Sammy Davis's coffee table. They were just beautiful pieces of art. So I would like my book to kind of model those.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
And, you know, as part of your book, you mentioned, you know, some pioneers and everything like that. So who are some pioneers in the hospitality industry that jump out for you? And you mentioned a little bit, you know, when we started off. But
Joseph Lee, Rebecca Howard is another one that I love. She had a hotel in Olympia, Washington. It was in Washington Territory at the time, and there weren't many blacks there, but of course, and she most of the pioneers in this book, they had restaurants first, and she had her and her husband. She was a fantastic cook, and people knew her for her meals. And so basically, she, with the restaurant where they were located, a lot of travelers would come through there, and she would cook a meal anytime for you.
Oh, wow.
Anytime. And so she was known for that, but then she added a hotel to it, and she started advertising that. We have a space for you to lay your head, and it just blew up from that point. She was super successful. She advertised in the Washington Gazette, I think it was, and she just made a great life for herself. She became very, very rich. Well, I think she was the one that, I think, you know, when they look at the taxpayers, she was the only woman on the list, you know? And so she became very successful. She was smart, though. She was smart. As she got more and more popular, she added on there, if you want meals after 8:00 p.m., it's going to cost you extra.
Sounds about right, yeah.
Business savvy. Yeah, absolutely.
But what was cool about her, she was very, her hospitality was so, people loved it. But you couldn't call her, some people would try to call her Aunt Becky. But she saw that as a racist thing to her. Only her closest friends and relatives could call her that. And I think the governor, I think his name was Pickney or something, came there to eat, and he called her Aunt Becky. She turned around and looked at him. She said, "I don't remember being, you know, my brother or sister or something like that." And so she didn't mess around. You had to call her Mrs. Howard.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And but she was a great hotelier. Another one is, and I brought this one with me because I forgot about Mr. Berry, Edwin Cornelius Berry, Athens, Ohio. Okay. He was a phenomenal hotelier, and he was a lot of first. He had a fine hotel, and he was reportedly the first person to put sewing kits, cologne, and stuff like amenities in rooms, and everybody else copied this cat.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was very special. He was a very special guy, and they said he would go into people's rooms, that like the guest, and, you know, he was married, his wife, they were in partnership in this, and he would find if they had buttons missing on shirts and things like that. His wife, we'd take him in the middle of the night. She would sew the buttons back on. He would take the stuff back in there. I mean, he was to that level of detail. But I'm getting ready to really blow your mind now. Most of his patrons were white.
Wow.
He was one. He was on there. People came there to see this because he was probably one of the only, if not the only, black hotel owner that had predominantly white patrons at his hotel. Now, he did not refuse blacks if they wanted to come. I mean, Booker T. Washington always said that he was a fine hotel and he loved his race, and just always raved about the Hotel Berry. But yeah, his hospitality was so great.
You know, I can't.
It's crazy to think.
It is, and I can't help but think that what are you unveiling, Calvin? These tidbits is what I often call the untold story. I mean, we hear these different elements of history, and we don't hear these other narratives.
Yeah.
And these other narratives that you're talking about have always been there.
Right.
And I think as a society, when we see the complexity and the integration of how everyone, and particularly people of color, played a significant role in the industry, I think it does the industry justice to see what I often call holistically all aspects of the business, right? And to understand that and have that information is just great to hear. So you're dropping some wonderful pieces that really helps to. I'm hoping people are picking up on these great nuggets that we can go back and do some more research on because you're dropping some great points here.
Yeah, I like one of my favorite things to say. You can't tell American history without black history.
Without question.
Of course.
Gotta have it.
And, you know, along those lines, you mentioned a lot of these hotel owners started out as restaurateurs. So I'm wondering, Victor, if you could just give us just very briefly, you know, the impact black and minorities have had on the cuisine here in the U.S.
Oh, wow. So I'll say quickly. So number one, the Smithsonian they have documents that date back to 300 years ago that there were chefs, enslaved chefs that helped shape American cuisine 300 years ago. So that's archived in the Smithsonian. So that's number one. So when we look at that historical piece, and then there's some other trailblazers, like for example, Jefferson Evans, who is called the Jackie Robertson of black chefs. He graduated from the CIA school, the Culinary Institute of America, in 1947. He was the first to graduate from the Culinary Institute of America. And then today, there's another trailblazer, a black woman by the name of Roshira Sanders. She's the first female black chef at the CIA. So when you think about historically, we have shaped the cuisine, we've led in different aspects of the culinary arts, and we are still leading in the culinary arts in so many different facets. So there are just so many untold stories, but if we're interested and curious, we can find so much. And when we look beyond our present thinking of what we see, we understand there's more to the story.
I think that's such an interesting point that slaves shaped the, American cuisine, because we think, we're obviously a nation of immigrants, and it's like, we don't have that one thing that's for us. Like, for me, when I was growing up, it was like, my folks are from the South, so it's like, to have Southern cuisine, it was like you had to be in the South to get it. Whereas now it's like you go anywhere and get it.
Right.
It's just so interesting. And so, Calvin, you touched on this a little bit, but we do have a couple graphics that we want to show the audience. And I'm hoping you can just kind of give us a little bit of overview. So who do we have here?
That's Joseph Lee. That is Joseph Lee, the guy that we talked about earlier that invented the bread kneading machine as well as the breadcrumb machine. His wife also was in the help. She was along with him because what happened, he died pretty young. And so his wife actually, because he did go to Squantum, he had a Squantum in after all that 1893 panic stuff. He built that 250-room restaurant, then he moved, and then he went to Squantum. He built another hotel, that Squantum Inn, and that inn was just as famous as the name carried with him. I mean, people knew him. And so they said, you can go to this hotel, you could pick out, your chicken, your fish, and he would bread it right there with his breadcrumbs. Because chefs back then, they would use crushed crackers. So that's why his tasted so much better.
Yeah.
Right. And so they said to exactly quote, I remember the quote, it was like, his hospitality was irresistible.
Oh, wow.
And so when he died, his wife, she created another restaurant and called it Lee's Inn, and to dedicate it to him. And she ran that for a while with their daughter.
Oh, wow.
Right. So I think at the end, when it was all over, when his wife did die, they had been in the hospitality industry for 40 years.
Wow.
And made a name. Amazing. Joseph Lee, man, he's a beast.
Amazing.
He's a beast.
That's so amazing. That's so amazing. And then we have...
That's his Woodland Park Hotel.
Okay.
That was one of the properties. It was on a huge acreage, but he added, I think he had a pool hall in there, bowling alley. I mean, it was just so much, everything. That's the cool thing about a lot of these hotels. And I think Joseph Lee, let me check. I think Joseph Lee was a former slave. Let me see.
Oh, wow.
Yes, he was a former slave.
Oh, wow. The thing that gets me is just the sheer size. Looking at this picture, it's like an actual, like it's like an actual hotel. It's not like an inn. It's like a huge hotel.
Yeah, it
really,
was.
Really
and that's the thing they said when he first purchased it, it was this beat up thing and it was all sand around it. So he added all of the landscape and all of the other stuff around it. Yeah, he put some work into it. It's a beautiful property.
Yeah, beautifully architecturally designed as well.
Yeah. And I think we have Rebecca.
That's Rebecca. That's a mural on the back of the building. There's a bread company there. I don't know if it's still there, but that's a mural of her that should still be there.
Wow.
Because I couldn't find, there were no photos of her or anything like that, but somebody put that mural there. But of course the hotel, and the restaurant is gone. I think it might be part of that building right there, but that's a photo of her. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. And I think
that's one of her ads.
Yeah.
Yeah. She was great. She did a great job. And even though she was married, she was the face of that hotel. And you'll find, the great thing, so many women play such a vital role in this industry. Even with the Green Book, Victor's wife, Alma, she played a significant role in rolling all that out and publishing those. She didn't get a lot of credit till later, and he put her name in the publication. But even Adam Blake Jr. is another guy that had a hotel and called the Kenmore, another very huge, beautiful property, and he ended up dying young as well. And his wife, Catherine, they thought she was going to sell it. She kept the hotel and ran it and was super successful. They thought she had sold it. They didn't even know it was being run by a black woman. And so, in a lot of these cases, and even in the previous situation, a lot of times the wives were there, being supportive, but they understood the industry as well, and they would just take over. That's that wealth, and it just kept going. I loved it.
And we have one more picture, and it's my favorite from Tulsa, as
yes,
you know. But
yes.
Before we get on, we're getting a lot of questions from the audience who just want to check on your book. So, the status of it, name, whatever you can give us.
Okay. The book itself is tentatively titled, because it may change, Hospitality Historiography, Inspiring Stories of African-American Hoteliers and Industry Pioneers Who Revolutionized the Hospitality Landscape. I don't know if that title will stay, but right now that's what it is. The book right now, as I mentioned earlier, is in the developmental editor's hands. I looked at the recent timeline that was sent to me. I know definitely I'll have books in hand by next Black History Month, but it could be a couple of months sooner, depending on how quickly we can, because it's going to take a little bit longer because we're doing a coffee table book. So placement, there's more art involved in the process. But yeah, by the end of the year, trust me, you'll know. You will know. I'll be all over social media with that book.
Wow.
Yes. And how can people follow along to get progress updates?
Right now, you can reach out to me at Calvin at iconicpresentations.com. I'm all over LinkedIn. I'm always posted there. And you can just put up Calvin Stovall, Iconic Presentations. You can find me. Cool. Find me everywhere. I'm all over social media.
Calvin's being a little humble too. I mean, there are a lot of individuals behind the scene that are hoteliers that see the value of what Calvin is doing and have stepped up to the plate and really supportive of him. And I'm kind of in that circle of just seeing what's happening and whatnot. And I want to just thank people and just know that what Calvin is doing is phenomenal work. And it is your passion. And it is your purpose. And it is your purpose, without question.
Yeah. And I've had tremendous support. What's been great about this is when people find out what I'm doing. I had a gentleman, his name is Mark Barksdale. He's a New York architect, and he found out that I was writing this book, and his great grandfather owned a hotel in D.C. Back in the 50s and 60s, I believe. And he wrote to me, and he was like, "Calvin, would you please include my great grandfather in your book?" His name is Wallace Barksdale. He sent me photos and everything. Oh, wow. So I had to make a trip to New York maybe a month or so ago. I reached out to him and we had lunch together. The guy was so he brought all these photos with him from at the restaurant. You could tell he was just glowing with pride. And so that's the great thing about when you do stuff like this. When you have people supporting it and believing in it with you. I had to raise $75,000 to get 3,000, copies printed, and I had support the American Hotel and Lodging Association Foundation. They were supportive of, Sheila Johnson, and a lot of people that, just help pull this along. So trust me. I ain't do this alone by no means.
True. And I'm assuming, and me and Victor signed copies coming in January.
I've been promising so many signed copies. I'm like, man, I'm gonna have.
and it's being recorded too.
So January is it, audience. I hope I answered your question, and I hope Calvin was able to answer your question. But one last thing, my photo. I got to get to it. Gentlemen. Who's this gentleman?
That is J.B. Stratford. John the Baptist Stratford is what they called him. He built a hotel called the Stratford Hotel in Tulsa on Greenwood. He was him in Ottawa. They called him O.W. Gurley. Were two of the most prominent figures on Black Wall Street and the richest. Of course, he lost his hotel during the Tulsa massacre in 1921, got burned down. And so what was interesting about JB is John Rogers, who is the CEO of Ariel Investments, who also helped fund the book. I reached out to their organization and to about funding, and his CFO reached back out to me, and he was like, "Calvin, we heard about this book." And I said, "Well, I saw Mr. Rogers on an interview talking about the lost generational wealth." Right? And so when I reached out to him, they found out I was writing this. I told him about this book, and the CFO was like, "Oh my God, John, he's going to love this." Wow. He said, "Would you please send us," because I was really calling him to get the rights to use the photo in the book. And he was like, "Well, can you send me what you would write about JB so I can give it to John?" And so a couple of days later, the guy's name was Benny Rosner, and he calls me back. He's like, "Calvin, John is supporting. He's like, this is fantastic. Here's $10,000 to support this effort." So I owe him another signed copy.
You're gonna be signing copies for next year,
right? But what's great about the thing is when you writing this, I learned so much, and I know Black Wall Street in Tulsa is like one area that a lot of people know, but there were other areas like that. The U Street corridor in Washington was one. They called it Black Broadway, where they had 400 businesses in one area. The 7th Ward in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania was another area. The Fillmore District in San Francisco was very, very popular. All these jazz clubs, hotels, all of that. And Black Bottom in Paradise Valley in Detroit. These were all areas like Tulsa. Black businesses, you know, get destroyed over time, gentrification, highways coming through, they lost a lot of it. So, so writing this book, I mean, I learned so much as well.
And, you know, we talked a lot about the, you know, history of, you know, Black ownership in the hospitality industry. And Victor, I'd be interested to know, what did the industry look like as far as, you know, minorities in CEO roles or in C-suite roles in your time at, you know, Marriott and other corporations?
Well, let me just speak from a general perspective. A couple of years ago, I think it was 2019, some scholars put together a white paper that really spoke about, you know, the issue of lack of representation of minorities and specifically blacks in the CEO suite. And we did a little research, and this project was pulled together by the Castell Project, and the NAB organization was the header, and that's the National Association of Black Hotel Owners, Operators, and Developers. And so under that umbrella, with the Castell Project being the data research for it, they searched out 630 U.S. hospitality companies with encompassing about 6,300 executives. And what they determined was, from those numbers and understanding that black people in general make up about 17.9% of the population, well, the employee population, if you will, for the hospitality industry, and overall African Americans represented about 13.8% of the U.S. population. So you have more people of color, black people, that can certainly fulfill a lot of roles. So one would say, perhaps, that should lend an opportunity for a pipeline of people to be in leadership roles and so on and so forth. But the facts kind of reveal this, that black people hold 0.7% of the CEO positions within the U.S. hospitality space, and black men hold 0.5% of the CEO positions, while black women hold 0.1%. And so there is still a lot of work to be done, and we know that the more we unpack and understand that we have the diversity of voice missing in the CEO suites, from women, black people, people of color, from different ethnicities. We have to continue to move forward, because we're out there in leadership roles. We need to have the support, not support, but we're preparing ourselves for these positions. So we need people to just lean into the quality of work that we do and how we continue to excel in leadership roles. And so we want to break through. We want to continue to move this needle even more. But this was, when we unpacked this information, it was, I can't say unfortunately it was surprising, but to see it in writing then speaks volumes to the lack of representation of black people, in particularly in the CEO suite model. So still a lot of work to do there.
Yeah, I can only imagine what it's like to see the numbers in print, because it's like you kind of know it in the back of your mind, but to see it on paper, it's very shocking. Yeah.
When I was the vice president at Hilton, I go to every conference, meeting. It was, I might see maybe one or two. Wow.
And do you both see that changing at all in the future, or slowly changing in the future?
I think it's just like Victor said. We just have a lot of work to do. I mean, I'm happy right now to be involved with Evan. I'm working with Evan now at the Advanced Leadership Institute based in Pittsburgh, and we have a program to prepare blacks for C-suite roles. And so organizations like that and programs like that, we do it in partnership with Carnegie Mellon Tepper School of Business. So we're helping prepare, but the people that are in hiring positions need to open their minds and and hire people of color and give them the opportunity. But we're ready.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
even hotel ownership is still a challenge.
it's
Now it's still only 2% of all are owned by blacks hotels that are out there. But you have people like Davon Reeves out there helping to train and teach people how to own own hotels. So we're working on it and working to make it happen, because it's really the financing that's the challenge for most African Americans to open hotels. And so you having that financial support is a big deal. So you have a lot of hotel companies that are now have programs that are designed to increase minority hotel ownership. So things like that, but yeah, there's still a whole lot of work to do.
When I see what I see in certainly being in the wonderful being in a school, a world-class school like the Nolan School of Hospitality. We know we have young scholars that are out there that are actually moving into those positions. Since being at the hotel school and since 2015, I know colleagues now, women that are in VP positions. Yeah. So when we get that diversity of voice that's sitting in the space, that voice was missing, but more of those voices that are in the space are asking those other questions, right?
Yes.
And I think asking those other questions helps to bring about, oh, okay, you didn't think about this, and just giving people that other lens of to think differently in regards to leaders that are out there. And so we see that happening, and the scholars that we're graduating now, and people around the country being graduating from historically black college and university, what we see around the country is that there are many young people out there, black and people of color, indigenous people, that are ready and certainly getting the education and certainly the support to be excellent, and they're already doing excellent work. It's just a matter of having a person at the table, but also having a mentor, also having a sponsor that's there, and having allies. All of that makes up the whole platform of opportunity, because Calvin and I can't always be the person that's in the room. If we have other people that are different from us, different perspective, that are saying, asking that question, so did we think about this? That's where the change really begins to ripple out much in a larger context. So.
Absolutely. And when we get there, we got to make sure we pull others up.
Of course. And with that, actually, Victor, a question for you. Alan checks in with a question. So Alan asks, at the Nolan School for Hotel Administration, how do you see opportunities in the industry for young black hospitality workers, managers, and owners? Cornell is a major player in the hospitality industry, and I wonder how many students are choosing this career path.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of our students are choosing the career path, but there's a different expectation in terms of how they think about the hospitality industry. Yes, there's certainly the solidity of having F&B, and there's an operations, general managers, all of those managerial positions. But students are more savvy. They're thinking more from a perspective of, let's think about analytics. Let's think about asset management, finance. So just expanding the platform of what hospitality represents is not just for students of color, but I think there's a different expectation. But yes, in particular, our students of color are looking for other opportunities and pathways. And I think the more the industry recognizes that as you're coming in to recruit at these different schools, that's a part of the expectation of the Gen Z student and how they think about being entrepreneurs, how they think about being consultants. Yes, they may not be getting at the very beginning, but certainly their mindset is quite different. But I think for the students that are there, they're being exposed to some great opportunity. And I think that's a wonderful space of what the Nolan School does, because we have access to wonderful alumni from around the world. And certainly they are there to support and to be, part of just supporting the cast of these students to be successful in the industry.
And I would be remiss if I didn't ask this question, but this year obviously is a special year. This is the 35th year of NSMH, and can you give us a little background about this?
Well, I'll just say quickly.
We could both talk about it.
So I'm so proud proud of this organization. Calvin mentioned when he was in school, and that Evan Frazier. So you had Evan Frazier, Penny Went, and Alfred Watts, and Michael Burkeen, who unfortunately left us at a very young age. But you had these four scholars, black scholars, who had a vision 35 years ago that started from the hotel school, and their idea was, how do we replicate this across the country. And now there are chapters all across the country. And so NSMH being founded at Cornell and now having chapters across the country, and Evan and Penny and Alfred and the love of Michael and what they've done, they've planted a wonderful foundation of success for people who see themselves as minorities in this space. It's open to anyone. But certainly if you are a minority, this is a space where I think NSMH is carved out. So we're celebrating 35 years tomorrow, where Evan will be on campus, and Calvin and other alumni that from the hotel school and other communities will be on campus celebrating and honoring that and hearing his story, and really building it for the future as well. And so we have some wonderful scholars now at the hotel school that are taking over the helm, but certainly it's an honor to be a part of NSMH. Professor Miller, Douglas Miller, and I are advisors for the chapter at Cornell, which gives me, again, great honor to be a part of that, and to know that when we're out and about, we're representing Evan and the founders, we're representing Cornell, and our students are stellar in what they do.
Yes, sir.
And so we're excited for what it has done, is doing, and will continue to do. And so we're going to celebrate that. So if you're out there and you're a part of Cornell and you're on campus, come by.
Come on by.
Yeah, come on by.
through.
Yeah, tomorrow at 11:30 at the Silver Birch Suite in the Nolan School of Hotel Administration. We're going to celebrate 35 years for NSMH.
There you
And
go.
Calvin, what's that like for you to know? I mean, 35 years is a long time. It's not,
Yeah,
3 or
telling
4
my
years.
age, man. It's a long time ago, brother.
Long time.
I just know that I was there when it started. It's just heartwarming to me. And now, the 35th year anniversary. I'm just so inspired by it all. I'm just happy to have been a part of it and still a part of it. And then getting the opportunity to work with Evan again. It's just I just think he's just such a great person, gentleman, just a really bright guy. So him and Penny and all the other founders, they, like you said, they planted it and it grew.
Yeah.
It's a tree now. It was a seed.
Yeah.
It's a forest, actually.
And before we wrap up, I want to ask you this specifically, Calvin. When you were thinking about the book and when the book's ultimately finished, what's kind of that one story or that one thing that you think will kind of stick out for people, really resonate with people? I know it's a lot.
Let me take my glasses off for this.
Okay.
What I think people are going to realize when they go on this journey in this book, they're going to find out how resilient Black people are and were. Because what people don't realize, and I know we've shared some stories, of some people in the book, but you got to think about the environment they did this in. The surrounding environment was intense. You're talking about racism, sexism, segregation. The environment was so tough, yet they were able to create a space that welcomed not only Blacks, whites as well, and create a level of hospitality top notch, despite what was going on around them. And even in situations like Mr. Lee that lost everything, he loved hospitality so much he came back and built it even stronger. So I think when people go through this, they're gonna be like, wow. And I think it know it will. It will inspire people to be like, if they can do that, then I definitely can do this now. And so what I'm hoping is that not only people will be educated about these, like I call them the hidden figures of hospitality, they're going to really walk away saying, wow, that was great to know that even despite the challenges that they faced, they still were able to be successful, because there are a lot of millionaires in this book, a lot of them. So I think that's they're going to walk away knowing, strong.
Calvin, what makes I'm even more excited about this is when we can change the conversation to say they will know about them. we want it to be, we understand it is a story. It's the American story.
Yes,
it is
it is.
the story.
Right.
It is part of the story. So it's not an other. It is, when you're telling the story, this is a part of the story.
Yeah,
and we want to get people in the mindset that when they're talking about hospitality intrinsically,
Right.
this is part of the story. And as they hear this, then they can carry that message.
Yes.
Then it becomes holistically what it was intended to be from the very beginning. But to your point, resiliency, persistence, perseverance, and it's always meant to be part of the entire story.
Yes.
But now you're giving them an opportunity to now use their own language, and as they articulate it, they can say, "Hey, so now I know this about fill in the blank."
Absolutely.
Fill in
There
the
you go.
blank.
And Victor, is there something you're hoping to learn?
You know, I've learned a lot just by listening to Calvin in regards to, you know, what he's just digging up and how he's just bringing this to surface. And I'm always curious. I'm a curious person, and the more that I can hear and want to hear different perspectives, it really helps me to be a better person for humanity and for my brothers and sisters, for however you shape and identify in the world, right?
Yeah.
So I'm all about just trying to be an active participant, being a bridge. However I can continue to support you in this work, Calvin.
Man, thank you.
And how I know that you're flourishing in it, and so that's just very exciting for me. It's very exciting for me. So I don't know how that answered your question, but let me just tell you, I'm a bridge, and I continue to just try to support however the greater good for humanity, and how we as Black people are an intricate part of that process.
Perfect.
That's
And
right.
Calvin,
I love
just
it.
very, very quickly, how do people stay in touch, progress with the book and everything?
Oh, yeah, I think we answered that. I think I gave my email,
Yes.
calvin@iconicpresentations.net, and you can also find me on LinkedIn
Cool.
as well.
Email,
I'm
LinkedIn.
all around, yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, Calvin, Victor, thank you so much for joining us. Audience, thank you so much for staying with us. Have a good rest of your day. Have a good Friday. Have a good weekend. And happy Alumni Weekend also.
Nick, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Victor.